If you paint pet portraits, you likely use black in every single portrait you do. I'm going to test out 6 different blacks today. There are so many black colors on the market that you could easily get overwhelmed and not know which one to pick. We are doing today's test on 140-pound Fabriano Studio 25% cotton cold press paper. You can find all the rest of the supplies that I love to use at paint333.com. I'm Jess and I teach watercolor artists the 333 method for watercolor painting, the 3 principles, the 3 properties, and the 3-step process. We're going to start with Payne's Gray. I'll often paint with water first and then lay down color. So that's how I'm going to test out all 6 of these black colors, but I'm also going to test them with my favorite brown gold color that I paint almost all of my gold or brown pet portraits with, quinacridone gold. Now, I am using American Journey quinacridone gold. I will be switching to either Daniel Smith or M. Graham now that Cheap Joe's has closed. And the Daniel Smith quinacridone gold, I know, is a different formula than this quinacridone. So I've written down the pigment codes of this quinacridone. You will likely, if you have a different brand, have some different pigments in your quinacridone. So just keep that in mind. So you can see that I'm already achieving some green. So if I was hoping to mix a darker gold with Payne's Gray, or even put Payne's Gray next to my quinacridone, I would be getting this green undertone. So that's the problem. I loved Payne's Gray though, because you can see how it's already granulating and it's a really dark black color, but it's also very blue. So I do know that the Payne's Gray I used here, which is M. Graham, is the same 2 color codes as the Daniel Smith version. So M. Graham and DS, same thing. Next, let's go ahead and test what I currently use, which is neutral tint. I currently use the American Journey neutral tint, but the good news is same color codes in the American Journey as in the Daniel Smith. Daniel Smith, American Journey, same thing. So I'm going to go ahead, paint it with water. I'm going to go ahead and put some neutral tint in there. And you can really see how dark that neutral tint is. And it doesn't have that blue undertone that Payne's Gray has. I really like neutral tint. And that's what I've been using ever since I switched from Payne's Gray a few years ago. So let's add that quinacridone gold. And you can see next to it, let's just see how it blends together here. I would say it's less green than Payne's Gray, but I'm still getting a greenish undertone using that neutral tint. I have been getting around that by adding opera pink to those mixes and as a buffer color. So if I'm trying to create a dark brown with these 2 colors, I'll just add opera pink and then it'll create a nice rich brown and negate that green. Or I'll put opera pink down as a buffer color between them if I don't want to create a dark brown, but I have an animal where the gold is right next to black. So now we're getting into colors, 3 colors I've never tried, and then another color that I have tried, but I honestly don't remember how it behaves. So now we're going to the Daniel Smith Lamp Black. It has one of the same pigments as the neutral tint, PBK6. So neutral tint has PBK6, but it also has 2 other pigments. So putting that down, I feel like it behaved very similarly to how my neutral tint does. Let's see how it behaves with my quinacridone gold. Now I'm wondering, seeing how this is also kind of green, if it could just be the quinacridone gold's fault for producing that green and not so much the black. But it's really behaving very similarly to my neutral tint. I like it a lot just from looking at what it's doing right now. Next is Daniel Smith Ivory Black, PBK9. So that has one of the same pigment codes as we find in the Payne's Gray. So this feels a little bit more gummy to me, like I'm having to work a little harder to release it from my brush onto the paper, and I'm having to use more paint. So it doesn't spread, it's not spreading as readily, and I'm kind of having to use more paint. I'm not sure what that PBK9 is, but it does feel a little bit gummy to me. It feels like this is something I would not be interested in using. Adding the quinacridone and mixing that a little bit. And we're still getting green. So just from this test, I would rule out Ivory Black. I don't like that gumminess that I was feeling when I laid that down. So now we're going to try Daniel Smith again, their Lunar Black. And this is a pigment called PBK11, which we have not found yet in any of our other blacks. Let's see how it spreads. It looks like a cool black to me, right from the get-go. And it feels more gummy, just like the Ivory Black does. So these two, just laying them down, felt a little gummy, felt like I had to work with it a little bit more. And you can really see, even though I put a lot of pigment down, it spread out, but it also got pretty muted. So adding a second layer, there we go, that helped. I can really see it granulating too, which is really pretty. It kind of feels like Hematite Genuine a little bit. Let's see how it does mixed with the quinacridone. That's a pretty brown, but it's also green. I'm getting greens more than browns. So testing this out, I really feel like, okay, it's probably my quinacridone gold, that the green is coming from that, more so than the black. We have one more outlier, PBK7, which is not found in any of the other blacks, but I did find it in the Core brand of black, in the Core brand of paint, their carbon black color. Really cool. It laid down very heavy, spread very well, which we would expect from Core. It's a very high spreading paint. Let's see how it does mixed with my quinacridone. Very pigmented black. But again, I feel like it's pretty green. I was really excited to test these three black colors because I remember thinking that Neutral Tint only had a single pigment, and I was wrong. It actually has three. So I was really excited to try out these three single pigment blacks, as well as that Core black color too. And you can really see how different they all are, which is always surprising because it's the same color. But I was really hoping that I would be able to achieve something that isn't green, and I didn't get that with any of these tests. But I was very impressed with the Lamp Black. And maybe that's because it has the same pigment as the Neutral Tint. The Neutral Tint also has two other ones, and it's probably behaving in a way that I'm very used to. So I am not opposed to trying Lamp Black more often, but this test also did make me jump out and say, away with you, Neutral Tint, I'm going to Lamp Black. I really like my Neutral Tint. But I am going to try to do some more tests with Lamp Black because that performed in a really cool way. And I do like it that it's a single pigment, and I'm interested to see how it might blend with my other colors in the palette. Payne's Gray is a great color if you are looking for a bluish black. Ivory Black and Lunar Black were pretty gummy. They required me to work with them a little bit more than I would have liked. If you are used to working with more gummy type behaving watercolors, you might appreciate that. The Lunar Black really reminds me of Hematite Genuine. It just seems so granular, and you can really see that here. It's funny because it kind of went where I put it, but then also granulated out towards the entire area of water I laid down. Core Carbon Black is a beautiful solid black, but it's spread like crazy. And it's also drying in kind of a funny way where it's already dry right here. Like where I put it, it pushed all the water away, and then the paint was able to dry really fast. And quinacridone gold is my only other color that I've noticed that does that. I'll put quinacridone into a wash, and it will push the water and any other pigment away and dry a lot faster than if I had done the exact same thing with a different color. So I hope this test helped you learn a little bit more about the black color options available to you, and maybe open your eyes to if there's a technique that you're trying to achieve with a certain color and it's not working, it very well could be the actual color that you're using and not so much your attempts at that technique. We can see with almost the exact same application of these 6 different colors how very differently they behaved and are looking as they dry. This test sheet is available as a PDF in the video's description. And I'll likely do another test similar to this with a different brand of quinacridone gold, especially now that American Journey won't be available. But in the meantime, I'm content using Opera Pink as a buffer color to still create those brown mixes that I like to have in my pet portraits. If you have a favorite black or favorite other color or a favorite way to even create a darker brown, please let me know in the comments. Now that we have all that information about the different types of watercolor blacks, we're going to go ahead and use neutral tint, which is the black that I'm the most familiar with, to paint this Dachshund dog. Now, if you're using one of the other black colors, it could very well behave a little bit differently, but I really like how neutral tint behaves, and no matter what black you are using, it will likely work in this painting because we're going to be using a lot of purple as a buffer color between the black and the gold areas. So you'll still be able to avoid getting green. All the supplies I'm using in today's paint along you can find in your supply list at paint333.com. The reference photo and tracing of Hank the Dachshund is available in the video's description. I just created this really fun resource for all of you pet portrait artists, and this is basically, in a nutshell, how I paint my pets from start to finish. Obviously, it's a fluid process, and sometimes I might skip around a little bit, but in general, this is exactly what I do in order. And for this specific painting, I've already chose my shadow color, which will be a deep purple, and my highlight color, which will be cobalt. I am really feeling like this, I want to lean into a really natural colored portrait for Hank. So I'm really going to lean into the gold, lean into the black, emphasize his eyes. But he does have some color in his collar, and one of those colors is that cobalt color. So I thought, let's put that in there too. And purple always just looks really good on animals that have black and gold in them. This resource is available in the video's description as a PDF, so feel free to use it yourself. So we have our reference photo edited, traced onto our painting surface. I am painting on Fabriano Rough 300-pound cold press paper, trimmed down from a full-size sheet to 22 by 28. We planned our colors, our shadow color and our highlight color, and I have an idea of the techniques that I'm going to use for this painting. And having that idea in my head or written down too always helps me just kind of get into the flow state of painting and not have to worry about how I'm going to necessarily paint certain parts of my subject. I erased some of the dark pencil lines using my favorite kneaded eraser. Now, Hank just has one whisker that I can see that's lightly colored, so I just took the time to mask that one single whisker out. I used my favorite masking fluid, PBO, and applied it with the backside of my pointy palette knife. And I masked out that one cute little whisker. Sometimes those little tiny details, especially for a commission like this, are really important to the pet's owner. So I try to keep an eye out for those really unique things about a pet and make sure I include those. So the next step would be the eyes, and then I'll move to the nose and snout. I like to do the eyes first since they're the most important, and I want to make sure I get those right and spend a lot of time on them. The nose typically requires a couple layers, so I'll do that next so I can come back to it. And then I like to do a quick win. The ears are my favorite thing to paint, and they typically paint very quickly. And so it feels like I've accomplished a lot, which is nice because oftentimes the eyes and the nose take a long time and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been painting forever and it's only this far. But that's the hard part. Once we get to the ears and then we move on to the light side and the dark side, things start to move very quickly. I just wanted to quick tell you too that I do have my blotting towel off to the side, way over here. I'm not going to put it actually on my paper because that will soak through the water that I blot onto my towel. So I'll try to keep in mind telling you what I'm doing as I go along. But if you've painted with me before, you really know how I like to paint, and I always start on these detail areas with my neutral tint, with my black color. Today we are using neutral tint for our black, and every other color that I'm using is listed in my supply list. And I always love to use my Princeton Silver Black Velvet size 6 round brush for these areas of really fine detail. I've just found that this brush comes to a really beautiful fine point. So I'm just going to take my time, and this might seem a little tedious, and it kind of is, but it's so worth it to really spend a lot of time on the eyes. And I've also found when applying the black outlines, to avoid it getting to be a kind of cartoony feel, the thinner lines help with that, and variegating your thickness of lines. So then, of course, I always have my other brushes that are usually a size 6 round brush for my other colors, and then also for just plain water, which is what I have right here. And that way I can soften lines as I need to right away while that paint is still wet. So I typically have my wet brush, my water only brush, be kind of just a blotted level of water, but that'll vary with whatever kind of technique I'm trying to achieve. So I'm really softening that inside edge of the eye that I just painted around with the neutral tint. And I'm adding quite a bit of water. I'm wondering if I can push that neutral tint color towards the edge. I really like how that looks. And in general, I've found that just adding water to these shapes as they're drying makes them dry in such beautiful ways. The ways that we typically think, whoa, that's watercolor when we see them. So I just added this nice pool of water around that black outline. And maybe add a little bit of a pool of water some other areas too. And I'm going to keep going a little bit and do some of those outside darker shapes that I can see. And then adding a lot of water. I really have a good idea of how neutral tint will behave when I put it on the paper, which is one of the reasons I love using it. And then I'm going to grab my grainer brush, just get it wet and blot it on the towel so the bristles are nice and soft, and then pull some of that neutral tint into the other areas of the dry paper so we get some of those furry edges that you can really see happening in the reference photo. And I'm even going to take this a step further here. Since some of these shapes are just so dark, I thought, well, I'm here, I may as well keep going after it a little bit. I want to keep in mind the more mid-tone areas of black and make sure I save some of those areas for the purple. And giving myself some of those furry edges with the grainer brush. And I'm also trying not to go too far into the shapes that we'll be painting with gold. I can always add more black. It doesn't have to be all the way up to where we're going right away. I like that. I'm in a good place there. Maybe drop in a little more water there. And I know that's going to take it a longer time to dry, but I love what happens when things dry with a lot of water in them. So let's go ahead and do the same thing on this eye. And just take care to do thin lines where they need to be really thin. And I'm going to come in with some nice water, do the same thing, softening this shape down here. So I'm kind of lifting to soften that inside edge of the black outline, and at the same time depositing water. And definitely taking lots of care not to paint in those areas of white reflections. And then doing a similar thing, painting some of the very dark black areas that I see around the eye. And also using my wonderful grainer brush. And I'm not quite painting all the black, especially because I'm having the right side be the light side, so I don't want to overdo it. Definitely using a very heavy mix of the neutral tint for all these applications. I really like that for the first layer of black on the eyes. So let's do the same thing on the nose. In a good spot here, our masking fluid's nice and dry. Bring this back so you can see it. And I'm just going to do the same thing, nice heavy mix of the neutral tint on my silver black velvet brush. And I'm just going to go in and give myself these outlines by painting in the very darkest dark areas of black on the nose. And I go all the way to the edge of those nostril shapes. And then sometimes, especially on the light side of the nose, I'll use more of my water brush to give a little bit of a gradient happening, a little bit more reflection happening in here. And then a nice blotted brush here, blotted, my water brush is blotted. And it's blotted sometimes, and then it's a lot of water other times. It's just a matter of feeling it here. It's cool because you can put down a ton of water and it actually almost keeps the paint in place by pushing it backwards. It's pretty cool. I've always had a lot of fun painting with neutral tint and water. A lot of magic can happen when you do that. And there we go. I kind of want to just erase that almost look of creating the outlines, which is funny because that's what we're doing, but we're making them look very watercolory and neat. Now I'm gonna actually come back up here and see, maybe I can get some blooming. Maybe you can push some of the pigment around and soften some of these edges before they're totally dry. Just like I said many times already, I love the things that can happen when you give your painting a lot of water. But the way it's going to behave will definitely vary depending on the paper that you're using and the paint that you're using too. All right, we have a beautiful first layer on the eyes and the nose, and we're going to be coming back to those to keep putting some layers on. But while we wait for them to dry, let's go ahead and paint the ears. This is just a lot of fun. Just love painting ears. It goes by so fast. All right, so we just have to keep in mind our dark side and our light side. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tint this water just a little bit so you can kind of see where I'm putting it. But I'm going to try and put almost up to the edge. I'm going to finish the edge with a grainer brush so I don't have to go quite completely. And I want to keep in mind some of those really pretty reflections that we see. So let's do that. We didn't paint the whole ear, as you can see. And then let's go over on the light side. I'm going to actually tint this with cobalt, since we're going to have cobalt be our light side color. So you can kind of see where I'm putting the water on this side. And I'm going to come up, we have some pretty reflections and shadows over here too. Nice big pool of color. And I didn't paint the whole ear. I think it'd be fun maybe if we could achieve some dry brush stroke shapes on there. Okay, I'm going to go in with the black right away. And in general, I just try to paint the shadow side ear first. So definitely focusing on where I see the really dark areas. This is fun too because we can maybe do some kind of visible brush stroke. I always love that. Looks really good. And that's going to stay wet for a while, so let's go ahead and do the same thing over here. I'm going to put the black, those areas where it's very dark, and maybe bring it down all the way. What do we think about that? I kind of like it. I'm still using my silver black velvet brush, not for precision, just because it has black on it. So typically I will keep black the same color on the same brush, but this dog has a lot of black. So what if we switched? I'm going to grab a nice heavy mix of that neutral tint on my flat brush. So I have a 3/4 inch flat brush, and I'm wondering if we can kind of do some fun shapes. Nah, that was anticlimactic. Okay, let's just grab, well, it's very wet. I don't know. I'm trying to get some grainer brush hair. There we go. I have to go to areas where it's a little bit drier to achieve that texture. I'm going to grab another round brush. I'm going to throw in, just because that highlight ear seems to be drying a little bit faster, I'm going to just throw in my highlight color. And then I'm going to go ahead and mix. So that was my cobalt teal. I'm going to go ahead and grab my purple, and I do have a couple wells of purple right now. So this purple is just my ultramarine blue and my opera pink. And I want to grab a nice heavy mix of that, and I also want to try to match the wetness on my brush with the wetness of the paper so that the paint actually deposits, releases from the brush, and goes onto the paper. Otherwise, sometimes the brush will just act like a sponge and pick up all that pretty water that you laid down. So a deep purple. I'm wondering, okay, I think a deep purple for me is going to be heavy on the ultramarine, and then even have some neutral tint in it. But the thing is, we already have a ton of neutral tint on the paper, so I think it'll naturally mix with this. There we go. I like what's happening here. And make a darker purple. And I'm going to go up to this shape with my purple too. And maybe even connect. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I connect the ears via the forehead with the two colors that I'm using. So we're going to grab another round brush, grab that cobalt, and connect those two shapes while we're here hanging out. And I have my water only brush handy, so I'm going to add in some water so that it mixes in pretty ways around here too. And I'm going to facilitate a little bit more. There we go. Bring that cobalt in. Just say, hey, you can play with each other. You can have fun. All right, I need my grainer brush because things are happening. And I'm going to just give some areas, it still has black on it. If it gets a little too wet, I like to dab it off. And I'm just basically making sure the shape is where it should be and accurate according to the drawing. And then also has a furry edge too, if that looks nice. It's getting into quite the reflective area here, so I don't want to bring it down too far, but I want it to get a little bit of that pretty fluffy free edge. And I'm just adding water and seeing what happens. Some splatter happened. I'm gonna pick, I think I fussed with that a little too much. I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit more cobalt right there. I like that. And still with my grainer brush, we have a lot happening. And I still want to scrape too. So bringing up, it's very pooled right there. I think I can give that some more time. I love some of these white shapes that are happening because we didn't paint the entirety of the ear. I'm gonna go ahead and drop in some water and keep pushing. I'm lifting too. It's just very pooled over here. So I'm lifting some of that out. And then maybe I can come in with some more purple. It's very pooled over here too. I don't want him to look too tie-dye, you know what I mean? He's super cute though. I'm just like I love him already. Okay, now is a fun opportunity while it's in this almost dry stage. I want to get my scraper tool ready, my palette knife. Still has masking fluid on it. And I want to have my grainer brush ready too. I'm going to clean that off, dab it, and see if maybe we can get some water resist happening. So we have to hit it at the perfect time. We get a little bit happening there. I'm just trying to create some of those hairy shapes on those areas of the paper that are almost dry. So I'm kind of laying down water to push away pigment. It's quite the balancing act of needing enough water to push the pigment away, but not too much water to create such a huge stroke shape. And then maybe we can And as I see things too, I'm just doing them. So I'm just looking at the edges, if I need to do grainer brush, keeping an eye on how dry it is so I can catch the timing for scraping and water resist. I love the scraping that we achieved near the purple. That looks so good. And I'm just kind of going where it's working. So it doesn't necessarily match the reference photo exactly, but we just have to hint at these things. We just have to encourage the viewer to see these areas and then fill in the rest with their imaginations. So we definitely do not need to scrape the whole ear, grainer brush every single edge. This shape, as much as I like it, is kind of intense. So, when in doubt, just add water. Just add water, like a plant. And this is also the light side here, so maybe I could lift off even more. And I love dropping in water while I'm lifting because I just want there to be water in there so it dries in really pretty ways. Really like that. Could we do a similar thing with this shape? Maybe we'll get some blooming. That could be really pretty. Maybe I could even emphasize this blooming with the grainer brush. Maybe give it a hairy shape. Maybe. I think that's gonna look really good once it's dry. It's kind of neat how it's causing the watercolors to granulate more, that addition of the water, and almost separate too into the two separate colors that we use, the pink and the blue. Ooh, I just love it. It makes me want to put water up here because this shape just dried so flat, and I thought we can make this more interesting, right? We can have some fun things happen up here too. Love that. I think that's all I really want to do with that. And we're going to soften some of those white, harsher shapes after it dries. We can lift and soften some of those edges and maybe glaze a little bit of a weaker mix of the colors on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and I have, let's see if you can see my palette. I have this pretty mix of neutral tint and opera pink. And that always makes like a really nice deep purple. So I come in on dry paper and it's kind of a weak mix of color, but still a lot of water on my brush. So my brush is nice and wet. The paint is kind of a weak mix and the paper is dry. And again, I'm almost kind of giving myself outlines here. But you want to make sure you have a lot of water in here, because then we get to do the fun part. So then I'm going to come in with a water only brush and then touch some of those areas we painted and let them mingle with the water we paint. And then go in. When in doubt, just add a lot of water. If I haven't made that clear already. So I'm kind of creating pigmented edges by having this water pool so much, but also saving a little bit of space to create some kind of semblance of precision for this shape so we understand what it actually is. And I'm going to do a very similar thing. I hope we'll see. With the rest of the collar. So I'm going to keep going with that pretty purple. And he has the fabric of his collar and then he has a couple buckles. So I'm going to go in and paint those buckle shapes with that same neutral tint. And opera pink mix. And then go in and drop in a lot of water to push the pigment we just laid down towards the edge. And then I'll continue that with the other shapes, and I'm going to try to, if I can, maintain a little bit of white outline between the collar shapes. So I'm going to drop in some more of that color. And you can drop in some more water and let these dry in these pretty ways. And drop in a little more water here too. And then we have one more shape over on this side. It's kind of in shadow, but I still want to incorporate that highlight color. So let's see if we can do that. So it's a little bit of a heavier mix of paint because it's darker. But I want to put a little bit of that cobalt in there. There we go. And then come in and give it a lot of water. I don't want it to completely take over. Drop in some more water, maybe push that cobalt towards the edges. And lift too. Especially this shape because this is the actual silver ring. So that can be nice and bright. So once I get that pigment to the kind of level I want it to be, then I'll drop in a lot of water to push it towards the edges. And this one just needs a little bit of that love, lifting and dropping in water to push the pigment to the edges. And it just makes these shapes look so much more interesting and so much more like watercolor than if you would just paint them straight up on dry paper and let them be. How fun is that? It's so fun. Okay, we can actually do the rest of the collar, even though these shapes are really wet, because I like to, if I can, keep a little bit of a white outline between them. I'm gonna grab neutral tint on my flat brush, and let's see if we can get, sometimes the shapes touch and I think that actually can look kind of neat. But I'm gonna try to not get them to touch too much. So trying really hard to keep these shapes from touching. Sometimes when they do touch organically though, it makes it look more like watercolor. So you just can't lose. Okay, grab some more neutral tint. It's a lot of water, isn't it? Okay, same thing. Trying not to touch that ring. And I love the little tag on his collar, so I'm gonna come back and fill that in later. Nice to get as close as you can so those white shapes aren't too far apart from each other. Okay, a really heavy mix of neutral tint for that top portion of the fabric collar. It just looks like to me that it's more in shadow, so I want to make it darker. And you're definitely welcome to do this part with a round brush, or a brush that maybe you find you have a little bit more control with. Sometimes though I find that these shapes, when they are created with a flat brush, look more like expressive and interesting brushwork is happening. And they tend to look a little less fussy, which I know is something that is easy to do. It's easy to make things look kind of too fussy. Put a little bit more neutral tint in some of the darker shapes. And it touched right there, and I think that looks kind of neat. So let's see if we can get somewhat of a cool plaid thing happening. I think in order to do that, I'm going to need to get this a little less wet so that hopefully when I lay down the paint, it'll create some soft edges without going everywhere. So I have my round brush with my cobalt, and I'm just going to see what happens when I lay down, as if I'm making that pretty pattern. This dog is so cute. He's just so handsome. That's what I call my cat, Saru, all the time. He's so handsome. He is. He's the most handsome kitty. And you don't have to completely match the reference photo either, because it's a painting and you have this beautiful artistic license. I'm wondering if I can lift up. There's some areas in this plaid that are lighter, so maybe I can lift. And we don't want to put too much effort into this either, because it could take away from the rest of the painting. And we want everybody to be looking at Hank's beautiful eyes. But I think it's worth a little bit of detail because this collar is super cute. And there's some red in the collar too. So I like to make my red. I don't actually have red on my palette. I have opera pink. So I like to make that red by mixing my opera pink with a little bit of azo yellow. You could also mix it with quinacridone too. And then I'm going to come in with my black heavy mix on a blotted brush, so not very much water. And I'm just going to keep kind of emphasize the design that is happening on the collar. And I'm just coming back in with some more of that cobalt because I don't want to lose it. It's just so cute. That cute little tag. So I'm just going to kind of put in a very watery mix of neutral tint where the tag is. And I like the way that that looks. Maybe a little bit of that red that we mixed up could go right here too, where we had the opera pink by itself. Put some over there too. How cute. How cute was that collar, right? All right. This didn't dry as interesting as I was anticipating it would. I'm going to lift off some of that extra neutral tint. It got a little too dark. So I'm just coming in with a blotted water brush, water only blotted, and seeing if I can pick up some of that pigment, and then clean off my brush on my towel. And hopefully this will make way for us to do a nice saturated layer of the quinacridone gold for his eyes. And it matches that one a little bit better too. So I'm going to come in with my flat brush. And what I think I want to do is tint it a little bit. We're going to be doing the quinacridone. And I'm going to put water all over the snout area here. Just these kind of upper lips that Hank has. And I'm bringing the water up into the light side, but we're going to be just really mindful not to overpaint the light side too much. And I'm going to just focus on the dark side and kind of the outside shape of the dark side. The other thing I love to do when I'm working with quinacridone is mix it with buff titanium, because then they dry in just gorgeous ways. I want to keep my grainer brush handy too, so that we can make those furry edges before the shapes dry too much. Look at how pretty that is. It's kind of going into the nose. That's so fun. All right, you can see my buff titanium over here. I'm going to try to reactivate this, get a nice heavy mix of buff titanium. And it'll be fun for you too if you're working with these colors, just to see the difference between opaque colors, which is what buff titanium is, and the other transparent, semi-transparent colors that we've been working with the exception of cobalt teal, which is opaque too. And I'm coming back in and making sure that I have the areas of quinacridone that I really want saturated. I'm going to go ahead and do the shape too, so that his beautiful quinacridone snout comes up into the shape too. And I just want to make sure I'm really saturating the edges of these shape areas. And then using my grainer brush too. And I think what would be nice is if we got our purple out again. And I added a little bit of opera pink to it so that it just buffers in a little bit better with that gold color. So I'm kind of distinguishing these edge shapes, these little features, by using purple. And we're going to use some purple up here too. Let's see, that's the snout. Okay, so I got to come in here with quinacridone too. And quinacridone is really quite the bully. So I bet if I put quinacridone in here, my purple will still stay where it's supposed to be, because it likes to push other colors around. Come in with some water. This is the light side, so I just don't want it to be too intense. I'm going to bring that quinacridone up into that other shape. There's another shape that has gold on this cute little face. But I'm really emphasizing this with water, a really watery mix for the light side of the painting. So really just lightening up. I'm lifting up here a little bit. That kind of got into the black more than I wanted. Ooh, pretty. Ooh, pretty. I like how that purple is providing a really nice buffer between the black and the quinacridone, because you can still get that green happening when you put neutral tint next to quinacridone. Again, I'm just laying down some more quinacridone, a little bit more purple up there. I think we could do the same and get this shape while we're here. I want to keep in mind our furry edges before it dries. And put our purple down between the black and the quinacridone. It's funny what the stress we put ourselves through for painting, right? Because it can be a little stressful when you're trying to navigate the edges and the dry time and the colors and the shapes and the values all at the same time with this big important part of the painting. And you're like, I signed up for this. Why am I doing this to myself? But it's just so worth it to see things come to life. And really, I think watercolor is more forgiving than we give it credit for, especially if you are working with great supplies, great paper. That's one reason why I love working with rough paper, is because it is so forgiving and I have a lot of time to work with it. I don't have to be too rushed. And also, in a way, it's kind of an advantage to be a little bit rushed, because that's when your paintings can look really fresh and exciting. So it all works out. I'm putting a little bit more pigment in the bottom. I really love this shape that's happening. So I'm going to bring it all the way out to the edge instead of grainer brushing that shape. I love, and I hope that that pigment keeps continuing to push towards the edge. I think that looks really neat. And I kind of want to soften this into the nose. And we can come back and lift that too. So let's see. Put a little water here. Quinacridone, I mean, look at that. When you lift it out, it glows. That's why I can't get over quinacridone gold. And I've tried I've tried quinacridone rust, nickel quinacridone, and they of course will vary depending on the brand you're using. But gold is my favorite. Some of the other ones can get this greenish vibe, which this one can too, but it seems to just happen a little bit faster. So, trying to give this snout a little definition without going too crazy. There we go. Push that purple towards the edge. I'm going to lift out some of this color and put water into it. Just got to remember, this is the light side, so I'm really trying to not overpaint it. This is a good time. We have to think about this while it dries. I'm going to pick up some purple with my grainer brush and see if while it's drying, I'm starting with the dark side here of the snout, if we can get some of those furry muzzle shapes, texture and stuff. I'm being very descriptive right now, but I'm just trying to get some of those pretty furry areas in place while we're at this pretty nice, precious, almost dry stage. And I'm starting with purple to give myself that buffer right away, and then I can go over it with black. And I had some gold on here, so it looks a little muddy. I need to mix up a little bit more purple. I love having purple mix on the painting by applying pink and blue separately. But when we're working with such a small area, I am absolutely fine with having it mix up on the palette first, because it just doesn't have a lot of room to mix on the painting when we're working so small and so detailed. I need more pink in my purple. And I'm going to bring it into the light side too. A little bit. And I want to have my water only brush handy and just soften these shapes. Soften bits of them, not quite all of it. When in doubt, add water, and great things will happen. And I think great things are already happening. It's going to be a lot of fun to add the whiskers to this muzzle. I think that'll add a lot of depth when we get to that point. The other thing we can do too with this pretty purple, well, yeah, I don't know. I was thinking, you know how their whiskers where they meet the face is typically has like this dark spot? Not really seeing that in Hank though. Maybe it's because his muzzle's a little too fluffy. And I have this purple, and I'm just kind of keeping an eye on things as they're drying to see if maybe I can add in a little detail as we go. And adding more water. Surprise, surprise. And a little bit more gold on the dark side. And I'm really focusing that gold on the edges of the shapes that we made. Nice heavy mix. And then we're going to come in and grab my water only brush. Why don't we do that pretty shape happening? Let's see, this is a little fussy, a little stiff over here. So I'm just kind of lifting over there a little bit. Anyway, back to our regular scheduled programming. Let's make this pretty black nose shape. And I'm going to really try to focus my efforts on the dark side again. And I'm kind of picking up color that's already on the paper here to show you where the water is going. And let's go ahead and do a buffer of purple. And you could even, pretty purple would be that opera pink mixed with the neutral tint. And you don't even have to put any blue in there. And then it's not nearly as risky for getting green. I love this little area on a dog or a cat that right above their nose. It's just so velvety and soft and just sweet. Super sweet. I like that. I'm going to grab some neutral tint. I know you can't see my palette, and I apologize, but I'm just grabbing my neutral tint now and kind of going on the dark side edge. I'm going to bring it around a little bit to the light side since there is some value, some pretty dark value there. Now let's see if I can grab my water only brush, blot it off a little bit, and just soften this purple into the light side. And we're just going to see, because I know really on the reference photo it's very dark right there. But that doesn't mean we have to paint it. We can just suggest it and keep it nice and reflective. I'm going to grab more of that purple, so a neutral tint opera pink purple, and blend that in to both the white reflection we just created and the quinacridone on the snout. Now sometimes a pretty hard edge looks really pretty. In this case, what do we think? It looks kind of harsh. I'm going to erase a little bit of that. Come back in with our purple. This is so pretty. This is so pretty. It's just so cool. I've had a lot of people ask me, you know, what do you do for gold fur next to black fur? And really, it's as simple as purple. Purple is your answer. Purple will save the day. I want to think too about, let's see, this, I think this shape just needs to be a little bit farther over. Soften that in a little bit. And I'm trying to think about my highlight color right now. I'm with the cobalt. And I'm thinking it would look really good as kind of like a reflective blue right there. Because I don't want to put it next to the gold. I think I would achieve green if I did that. But it's safe next to the black. It's definitely safe next to the purple. That looks pretty. What do we think about that? What do we think about that? I might grab this. Feels like it needs to go down into the nose now. But it's a little dark right there. There you go. Grab some more of that purple for right next to the cobalt. Oh, pretty. Oh, pretty. And look at our nose, our little funny nose with the cobalt on it. I'm just going to soften that a little bit. That can be our little reflective color around the nostril on the light side. Let's just see how that works. All right, while we're here, let's go ahead and see if we can, actually, I want to scrape. I think we got a great opportunity to scrape. So I'm kind of scraping and lifting color and also scraping and depositing color at the same time. Yeah, I think this snout needed a little bit of texture while we have the opportunity to do it. I think I let this get a little too dry, unfortunately, for some of these scraped areas, but let's get the rest while we can. Ooh, how fun are those? I love when you get it just perfectly like that and just scrapes that top layer of paint. Looks so good. I wish we would have caught it over there a little bit better. But there are other ways to achieve. Oh, that looks so nice. That looks so good. How fun is this? Let's go ahead now. We got some scraping in there. Oh gosh, now I think of another thing I could do before I start the nose. I'm going to wash off my greener brush. I kind of want to see if I can do some water resist on that velvety spot. But I don't think it's quite dry enough yet. There are parts that are a little bit drier. So I'm going to just keep an eye on that and see if I can capture that before I get too far into the nose. All right, I think I'm going to come in. I think I want the nose to be black. I was thinking about purple, and I might still have some purple in there. But we have so much color happening on the rest of Hank that I bet we can get away with having a really punchy black nose. So I laid down a really heavy mix of neutral tint on the dark side of the nose, and I'm just using water now to bring that pigment to the light side. And I'm gonna just have fun getting this nice and watery, softening it into the snout, and softening it into the reflections that we want to maintain on the nose. So I'm kind of just lifting and dropping in water and softening the dark into the light. I'm going to grab some of that cobalt. I think a little bit of cobalt in the reflective area of the nose could look really kind of fun. And it's mixing with the neutral tint on the dark side. That looks super great. I do really like how that looks. Putting a little bit, grabbing my water only brush, softening in where I put that cobalt. I think I need a little bit more cobalt right there. And maybe in some other spaces. A little bit, a little bit. Ooh, it's fun when it just starts looking like a painting and you're finding some success. But these big detailed paintings, especially these areas of high detail on a big painting, they require quite a commitment of effort and time, but they're so worth it. And it's so fun to just see them come to life like that. See if we can drop in that line that we lost on the nose. Looks really nice. And then I'm just also dropping a little bit more neutral tint along the edges, and maybe I can kind of soften those in. I'm going to leave it like that. I'm not going to soften them quite yet. I can always come back and lift those a little bit. I think what would look cool though is if we did this neutral tint area that you can see right under there, those little upper lips that he has. So I just filled in that shape with a nice heavy mix. I'm gonna come in with my grainer brush. I'm gonna grab a little bit more for my grainer brush. Bring it up a little bit. Not crazy because I can kind of soften that in too. And then I think I'd like to make this edge just a soft edge, not necessarily a really fluffy edge or really furry grainer brush edge. I'm going to grab my purple and put a little bit of purple there to blend those two shapes together a little bit better. There we go. And maybe we can scrape some of that neutral tint off. And keep it looking fluffy, furry at the top. All right, we're zoomed in on the eyes. Let's go in and do a nice layer of quinacridone. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by painting with water all around that iris. And I'm just taking care, so I'm kind of painting over the neutral tint we already painted, but I am taking care not to put water where I see the reflections. I think it's fine if it kind of goes into the pupil a little bit, but we want to make sure those reflections are really nice and white. All right, so I got a nice pool of water. And then I'm gonna go in, I have another size 6 round brush. So a nice heavy mix of quinacridone on a wet brush. And I'm just gonna plop that in there and let it spread around and really focus the majority of the pigment towards the edges of the iris. Really dropping it in there. I guess it kind of worked out that the dark side eye got a little bit more of that neutral tint than the light side eye did. And really making sure I get a lot of that on the outside edge of the iris shape. And then I have my brush with purple on it, going for that purple that we created with the neutral tint and the opera pink. And I'm gonna put that on the top where there's a nice clear shadow. And then this is kind of where I'm also painting around those reflection shapes. He has a lot of little, precious little reflections in his eyes. And then I'm bringing that purple down around the outside edge of the iris on the bottom as well. And if you can achieve some somewhat thinner lines between those little reflections, it'll look a little bit more realistic. So if you need to, size down your brush a little bit to make that happen, I think it's worth it. There's a lot of water up here, so I'm just gonna take some of that off. And then I'm also going around where the pupil will be too. So I'm giving myself that buffer of purple everywhere. Basically the gold is touching the black. And everywhere there's an intense shadow. And then I'm just dropping in some more of that gold where it maybe needs to be a little bit more saturated. And we will probably likely go in and lift out some of this gold too anyway. Because we all know how beautiful the gold is when you lift it out. So we're going to give ourselves some more pigment to work with for lifting. Okay, we'll let that dry before we finish off the eyes. Finally, right? I think it would look good too if we just finished the whole head shape with this and this white space. So I'm going to come in, and I have this kind of dirty water, which actually is kind of nice because hopefully you'll be able to see where I put it. And I'm going to go ahead and just paint with water this white shape we still have in the middle. And we have a little bit of a white shape over here too. Now we do have some gold shapes as well. So why don't we take care of those? I'm gonna go ahead and grab a nice, now we didn't paint with water on those, but that's okay. I'm gonna grab a nice heavy mix of quinacridone, put it right in those shapes. And then I'm just gonna pick up my greener brush, soften the bristles with some water, dab it, and then grab that nice purple so we can kind of buffer that gold into the rest of the painting. And then I'm gonna grab some more of that pretty purple and make that kind of our reflective color. Let's see, I'm gonna grab a little bit of that blue for our purple that has some blue in it for our shadow color, just to kind of blend in the purple that we have on the ears. So let's put some of that purple on this side. I'm gonna bring it around to over here around the eyes. I always like having some shadow color around the eyes because wherever that color is, typically that's where your eyes are gonna be drawn to too. I'm gonna grab a little bit of a watery mix of that purple and just glaze over those white shapes here and here, and maybe, yeah, get some of that with the greener brush. Drop in a little bit more water there. Maybe we can have that dry in some pretty ways. And then maybe take in and glaze around the eye here as well. Without painting that too dark. Let's see if that is still wet. I'm gonna grab some of my cobalt, so I'm just grabbing some cobalt here and put it along this edge of the black areas. And I am just to give me some buffer between that yellow there, and maybe bring it up here. I really like the things that are happening already. How pretty is this? So I'm just using my wet water only brush and softening some of these areas that are just kind of harsh. I'm going to add some water because it just got a little dark in some of these reflective. So I'm just pushing it back a little bit. So now that we have all this color in place, I'm basically just kind of going around and adjusting value and making sure I still maintain some of those really pretty reflective areas that are seen in that black fur. I think we do need a little bit of black on the dark side. I don't want to erase too many of the cool effects that we've achieved from our previous layers. I have some black and some purple on my grainer brush. I'm wondering if I can get some softer furry bits happening. Just have to kind of play with it and see what it does when we add these colors and shapes, and if it's doing kind of what we're hoping it will do. So I just have ultramarine blue on a size 2 brush. I'm going right into the dry paper, and I'm going to go ahead right smack dab in the middle of the pupil, put this beautiful ultramarine color. I'm going to start over here actually, right in the middle, and painting around those pretty reflections. You don't have to get super close because we are going to soften those reflections too. But some ultramarine right in the center of the pupil gives the eye a lot of depth. And then using a smaller brush will help you get between those reflections. So now, let's see, now that we have that in place, we can come in with our black and finish it off. And then I come in with a water brush if I need to, if anything's a little too harsh. Soften those shapes together a little bit. And kind of just soften the eye in general and make sure everything is kind of where it should be in terms of accuracy. little bit more ultramarine in there to just make it nice and dark. And I'm just softening, and like I said, just kind of making sure everything looks shiny and precise. And I'm going to see if we can lift a little bit of that quinacridone and create a pretty highlight in the iris. Really bring a lot of life into the eye when you do that. So you can feel free to just kind of do whatever your own painting needs to get the values, and color and shape, to get that eye looking really good and lifting a little bit around the eye. Look at that. It's just cool to think that we came from this to that with just a little bit of blending and lifting and a little bit of precision. Isn't that crazy? It's all paintings have an ugly stage, right? And you can really see that when you look at the differences between those two eyes. It's almost comical. I'm gonna grab a little bit of my orange, so like my orangey pink, and put it right next to the iris in the white of the eye on this side to make that a little bit more believable of a value and color right there. And I'm trying desperately not to erase that highlight that we worked really hard to maintain. And putting a little bit of that orange in there is good. I'm gonna put a little bit more, kind of a purplier orange on the other side. Blend that in. I lost it a little bit. See if I can kind of lift that out. There you go. The other thing we need to do is just soften, oh so very close to the edges on those reflections, and it'll make a really big difference. So water only, basically just kind of outlining those edges of the reflections with water. And it'll kind of smooth out the pigment around them, make it look nice. Sometimes I even lift out right next to a reflection to make it look like it's kind of a bigger reflection, if that makes sense. Oh, I love it. I just love it. All right. I think I need to stop because sometimes if you keep fussing and softening, it'll lose the precision that it needs to look like a real eye. I'm just going to go in and do the same thing with the next eye. And then we should be getting very close to being done with the head so we can do the body. a lot of work, but look at how worth it is. It's just so pretty. So I'm gonna go ahead and I think I'm just gonna do this on dry paper. So I'm gonna grab my flat brush and a nice heavy mix of neutral tint, and and have my grainer brush handy too. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab some water and bring in this neutral tint color up into the rest of the face here. And I'm kind of bringing it up into the face because I think it's kind of part of that, of his face shape too. I'm just kind of adding more water as we go towards the highlight side with our grainer brush, just to have that nice contrast in value. And it's mostly purple over here, so it should blend in nicely with the next to the orange. Grab a little bit of black and make sure I have this kind of accurate coloration as well. And now it's just really starting to feel like it's congruent and one nice big head shape instead of all these weird white shapes happening. Just grabbing a little bit of purple to blend those shapes together a little bit, just so they look a little prettier, not so muddy. I'm going to add some water so that this collar and the fur kind of become one shape and make it a little bit less obvious where things start and end. And then I want to make sure I scrape out some of these whiskers. We're going to do whiskers with our black pen too, but I think this will help. It's kind of neat how it pulls. It kind of gets the color off and also pulls it to the outside edge past the color. I tell you, scraping is just the coolest. Once you discover scraping, you're going to incorporate it into every painting you do. It's a lot of fun. I think that's all it needs. We don't want to do too many whiskers because it can be really distracting. All right, we are at the fun and fast part. All of it has been fun. It's not always been fast. Some of it's a little bit stressful. It's all part of the plan. Okay, you might be thinking, how is this going to be fast? Because it's a lot, right? We have a lot to cover, and we do have some detail, but the cool thing is we're going to approach these paws very similar to how we approached a collar, by creating shapes where hopefully the pigment can run to the edges and make it look really watercolory and fun. So I'm going to start with a heavy mix of neutral tint, and I'm kind of painting rough shapes of his nails. And you can even kind of capture the reflections. I want to have my wet brush handy too. Hopefully you can see everything. You can see more than before. Let's see, I want to put this here. Okay, so that neutral tint is just becoming the color we use here. And then while these shapes are still wet, we can kind of come in with some plain water and catch some of the edges of the shapes. Without totally making them completely abstract. So right now I'm catching some of those shapes. Little bits of the shapes, and then painting with water the dark areas of the paw. And then I'm going to come in with neutral tint. So we're going to just do these cute little paws he has, and then we'll come in and do the body, and that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to keep in mind that pretty purple shadow color for these areas around where there's going to be gold. And the other great thing about doing it in such a abstract way is that you just don't have to worry about total precision. You can tell this is a paw. And beyond that, it'll be fun to let the viewer fill in the details. So adding water and letting these shapes mingle. And then we can go in and do the same thing with the other paws. And I really like how even in the reference photo, this part of the dog is out of focus. And that almost helps us out because it's very easy to overwork and over detail the painting. But if we can't even see that detail in our reference photo, now all of a sudden it's harder to do that, which is a good thing. We want the viewer to be looking at Hank's super cute face. I'm gonna put more water in here and let these shapes just hang out. It's just drying in a cool way already, way up there. So we have our little paw nails, and I'm gonna just touch those nails to create a little bit of a shadow under the paw. Oh, his paws are so cute. And paint with water. Make sure I get enough water. There we go. Leave some white space. Grab that purple, and we have to be cognizant too that we're shifting. We're right in the middle. We're shifting toward the light side with this paw. So I'm going to put, but we're also gold, you know, we also have a lot of gold right here. So I'm going to focus the purple on this side and kind of where the gold will be in the paw. Let's see if we can do that. Grab another brush for my cobalt. And put that on the outside edge here. And I'm even gonna maybe let that linger into the body shape. Then we can grab our quinacridone, put that right next to the purple. And again, it doesn't have to be completely accurate. We don't even have to put the quinacridone everywhere we see the quinacridone. We want it to really just be the interpretation of that foot. I like, oh my gosh, his paws are just like these chunky, cutie things. I love it so much. But you can kind of see already how much of a bully that quinacridone is. It just took over everywhere we put purple. It really just went to town, didn't it? It's just funny. I'm going to, sometimes as I go, I see things. And I just see, okay, would it be cool if we could just connect these shapes a little bit while they're wet? And I don't always intend or plan on those things. But that's where getting into the flow state of painting and letting yourself have a little bit of freedom, it's just so much fun. Let's see here. I'm gonna go ahead and do that again. Actually, I'm gonna grab my black brush for my black color. And I'm gonna make it more of a watery mix since this is the light side of the painting. So really nice and watery here to do these nails. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of the pigment so they're a little bit lighter. I just think it's so much fun that when you get to this point in the painting and you really can just have a lot of fun. I really like how that looks. I'm kind of gonna see if I can replicate that a little bit on this paw too. Let's see if we can lift up some of that black. I know this is a little bit harder for you to see because I have zoomed out so far, but I also want you to be able to see the whole body. At the same time. So now I'm kind of doing almost what we did with the collar, where I'm lifting and dropping in water. Doesn't that look cooler? I just think that looks really neat. I'm keeping some of that reflective, the little bits of reflections too. Dropping in water to push it towards the outside. There we go. That should get us where we want to go. How fun is this shape? I just love it. I love it so much. A little bit of that visible brush strokes can be so fun. All right, I'm going to come in with my flat brush. I'm kind of feeling this a little bit different of a technique than we did here. Coming in right on the dry paper and kind of making this shape a little bit more in focus. Kind of more so like how we did the collar with these shapes. So pretty watery mixes. And maybe I can take my grainer brush. And then maybe I can grab my cobalt teal and do a nice little reflective shape along the edge of the foot. Now let's grab our, we're running out of brushes, we have so many colors. I'm going to grab just plain water and try to do the same thing here. Have this shape really look kind of neat. And I want to do the same thing with this shape too. So just dropping in water, lifting. I have to scrub, it got kind of dry, so I have to scrub some of that pigment off. And then adding more water so it really gets out to those edges. And I want to do the same thing with this pretty quinacridone shape that we created. These little details, it's hard to see on your screen, and it's hard to see when you step far away from the painting, but they will absolutely draw you in. And now I'm going to just go ahead and paint around. He has the cutest little belly, and this just makes me want a dachshund, because you can just tell how soft it is. Okay, so I'm kind of going around the shoulder shape and the belly area that is significantly lighter than the rest of his body. with water. So I'm kind of connecting some of these leg shapes I've created. And I want to move the color that we have towards the edges of those shapes, but I also, let's see, what else do I want to do? I want to put black here. I think it needs a little bit of black on the bottom. So let's get some black in here. And maybe a nice watery mix of black as we get close to the light side. And I think I also want to keep a white space between these really pretty shapes that we made, if we can do that. So hopefully just water at this point. That quinacridone or cobalt teal shape is very wet, so I'm trying hard not to touch it right there. I'm going to grab my grainer brush too and make this look a little bit more softer. Let's see. I kind of want it even softer and maybe not so in focus. Okay, this is fun. This is so fun. I'm gonna put a little bit more there. All right, so we have this really pretty shape, and then let's see, we have a black shape here too. So let's put this black shape on this part of his body too. And he has another quinacridone shape right here, so let's grab some of that, bring it into this pretty shape. He has one right here too, but we're just gonna get green if we put it there now. So I'm gonna let that go. And then hopefully bring this up into pink, which I wasn't planning to use. So this is kind of fun to see this grow. I'm gonna put some right here and then into that shape and then into this shape. So just plain water. My water's really dirty, so I'm gonna try to grab my clean water here for blending some of these. I really just love how his belly is so like bald. It's just so cute. He's so cute. Okay, I'm gonna grab my grainer brush had black on it. I'm gonna grab a little purple for it because I do like his black hair that he's got kind of around, but I think purple will serve us better if we put it next to the gold. A lot of fun things are happening in here. I hope you're having fun with this because I am just loving it. Okay, I'm gonna just grab water, pull some of this pigment around that we have with the grainer brush. Blend those shapes a little bit. I really like this, and I know it's black. So what if we grab some more purple on our grater brush? And it's just picking up my water here. There we go. I don't want to overpaint this. I think I like what's happening too much to do black over there. All right, kind of lifting a little bit, softening that shape. What we could do is we could go in and glaze some black fur over it if we wanted to. I don't know if I'm gonna want to. He's so cute. I really love it. Okay, now we just need to do a similar thing over here. What I'm gonna do is, I love all the splatter I'm getting from my water cup on that side of the painting. And I think I need to get some more of those. They're so cute. Okay, I'm getting distracted. Let's do a similar thing. So I'm painting with water, and I'm gonna just paint with water to highlight the lighter areas on the body. So I see a kind of nice highlight here. And right here, it's a pretty highlight. And we're kind of picking up that purple. It's very pretty. Put in a lot of water, so maybe we can get some of that purple. And I like the blueness of that purple, so I'm going to lean into that quite a bit. Well, I still want it to match and put a little bit more pink in there. And I think I need it to be a little bit waterier. And then what we can do is see what will happen if we put in some black. Need a little more water. Heavy mix of neutral tint along the darker areas of the body there. So kind of filling in the white. And then I'm just gonna soften that into that shade too. I like this though. I like that dry brush look. I love the blooming we're getting too. I just love everything and I just wanna look at it while it dries. I'm going to re-wet this area and put a little bit of black up there. I think that would help distinguish the body from that collar area a little bit better. And put a little swipe of purple Get a little swipe of purple. I have to get it really wet for it to deposit there. I'm going to put it on this side of the world. What do you think? Kind of like that. Maybe it's a little dark. Lift up a little bit of that. Or put water in it. Nah, well, what works better, lifting or adding water? That looks good. That looks so good. I do like the purple as a buffer here. And bring that purple down into the leg, because that's kind of what it actually does. This is leg connects right there. The other thing we need to do too is the shadow. When I do full body dogs like this, it's really important to put a shadow on there. And it's also really scary, right? Because it's just like this perfection. And now we're gonna put a shadow on it. It's not as hard, it's not as daunting as you think. So I'm gonna zoom out here on the reference photo. And you can kind of see his little body shadow. The other thing too is you want to keep in mind that we have this light source, this clear light source coming from here, which actually, I think actually kind of makes sense with where the shadow is in the reference photo. The other thing is, nobody's going to look at it that closely to make sure that your shadow is actually accurate. So don't overthink it. And what I like to do is, by the time I paint the shadow, I usually have a nice reservoir of dirty water to work with. And that's usually what I'll paint the shadow in. So let's see, he's got some nice shadow over here. Got a lot of body. And I paint it really loose. I paint it really watery. Paint it with that dirty water first. And I do leave a little bit of space. It just helps keep those shapes separate. So try to keep that whole shadow shape like a big pool of water while we finalize its actual complete shape. Isn't that crazy how just that alone really made a difference? Not too crazy about that. I'm going to see if I can erase it with a Kleenex. That looks good. Let's redraw that a little bit. What do we think? I really like it. We don't have to overthink it either. I love the hard edges too. Now I just want to put a little bit of color into the shadow. So I do the same thing and I kind of start with the highlight color and move towards, boy, a little bit of cobalt sure does go a long way. That's nuts. Move towards the shadow color. So we're just moving this in this big pool of color that we created with our dirty water. I'm going to take a brush with clean water, move that in there, kind of move it around a little bit. I don't want the shadow to be the shape that we all really notice and look at. I want it to just be a little bit of a compliment. So I'm kind of putting in more water than color here. So lifting a lot of that cobalt out. It really went to town. And then I'm putting most of the color and value right next to the dog. And then the shadow gets lighter as it moves out away from the dog. A little bit of cobalt here. It's really pooling right here. I'm going to lift a little bit of that out. A little bit of cobalt. Oh my goodness, look at that. Just goes everywhere. Lift that out a little bit. And then coming in with, oh my gosh, that's going to be a lot of purple, isn't it? A little bit of purple here. Maybe a little bit over here too. And then just kind of letting that go next to the dog. And I'm going to try to take care of any crazy big pools because those will bloom out as they dry and that could be kind of distracting. We just want it to be a pretty gradient shape with maybe some pigmented edges. I'm never opposed to those. I love it. A little shadow. A little shadow goes a long way. We are, I mean, look at this. We're so close. I just want to add a little bit of that gold fur to here because that's where it is. So I'm going to go ahead and just use my grainer brush. Let's get a little bit of a layer of water there so it's kind of softer. I'm going to grab my quinacridone and put that out there. I want to grab a little bit of buff titanium with the quinacridone for the top layer. A little bit of a heavier mix. There we go. And then I think I want to grab some opera pink too. Like an opera pinky purple. And a little bit more quinacridone on this shape, right next to the top. And then I think I'll soften that in. Maybe with a little bit more. There we go. Ooh, the buff titanium really goes to town. Just needed a little water to come alive. can kind of soften those into the white spaces too, a little bit. We don't have to go crazy because it looks kind of nice with some of those white edges too. All right, let's go ahead and add some whiskers. And I want to have a wet brush handy too to manipulate these after I get them on the paper. Just to soften them in a little bit. I love this ink pen for this reason, because you can kind of manipulate it before it totally dries. We also have that whisker that we masked, so we'll have to get rid of that too. Whiskers are done. Let's remove the masking fluid. I just have to find my eraser. I'm using a tool for this, but I actually like using a kneaded eraser better. I just couldn't find it. And then you would soften that in. So it's quite the harsh, intense shape right now. So I have a wet brush and I'm just gonna move the pigment that's around it into it a little bit to make it thinner and a little bit softer. Splatter. I don't want to do too much splatter. I have a lot of splatter that just happened. That purple is pretty though. It's pretty to do a little bit of purple. There, that's all I want to do for splatter. Okay, so looking at our list, we did the black whiskers, we removed the masking, we have some splatter on there, you can sign it now, and then of course anything finishing wise that you might want to do. I want to call it. I think this was a great paint along. And what I might do is I like to step back and then come back with fresh eyes. I probably will refine the nose a little bit, make sure I have a nice highlight and then the nostrils are even. And I might glaze that white shape with some cobalt, but I'm not sure yet because I do like how it kind of matches these white shapes. That's why I think it's important to just to kind of step away, come back to it with fresh eyes, see if there's anything that really jumps at you that you could edit. And then I will assign it and get it ready to go. I also think maybe I need to put a little bit more black in that eye. But how fun was this painting? I encourage you to subscribe and like this video if you found it helpful. Thanks so much for painting Hank the Dash Hound with me, and I hope you learned a little bit more about your options for black watercolors.